So today, The Intercept has an article out titled "Arrest of Journalists at Standing Rock Tests the Boundaries of the First Amendment." It starts off by talking about Pat Boyle, a Denver-based journalist who was shot in the abdomen last Sunday by a rubber bullet as he reported from the North Dakota Access Pipeline on a clash between demonstrators and police that would end with 26 protesters sent to the hospital and 300 requiring other medical treatment. Police were reacting to an attempt by Dakota Access Pipeline opponents to tow away burned vehicles that officers had secured in place to act as a highway blockade, preventing access to pipeline construction sites down the road. The rubber bullet that hit Boyle tore right through his press pass, leaving a jagged hole through the words "Unicorn Riot," his news organization's name. And you can see in the picture there that his press pass was nearly destroyed. Unicorn Riot have been arrested 3 times in North Dakota and twice while covering Dakota Access Pipelines in Iowa. In North Dakota, at least 7 journalists in total have been arrested while covering the clashes, according to a count by the Bismarck Tribune. So let me repeat that. 7 journalists have been arrested at Standing Rock or in North Dakota during these protests in the last year. 7 journalists have been arrested. A lot of these arrests have happened, before this point now, before November 8th, before the election. My point is, these arrests are happening under Obama. This threat of the First Amendment not being a thing anymore, this is happening under President Obama, the most progressive president in history. The article goes on. Nick Tilson, co-founder of the Indigenous Peoples Power Project, which trains Native people in direct action tactics, added, "Indigenous people are here to stay, and we're not going to move unless it's on our own terms, because this is our treaty. This is our treaty land. This is our ancestral land. This is where our people have been for thousands of years." And I read that out loud because the last video I did, I told them, please don't go anywhere. And luckily this is their view too. This is your land. This is the very, very minuscule piece of land that the United States actually agreed to leave you after they invaded and took over your entire country and then murdered millions of your people and assimilated the ones they didn't murder. This is so important that we don't give up. God bless you, Native Americans, really. I don't know where you get the strength, but I admire it, and I am trying my hardest to summon that strength in my own life. The article goes on to talk about, I believe Chris Schiano is with Unicorn Riot. He said, if you come from too radical a perspective, your right to report is somehow in question because you're outside of the ideological frameworks. Oh, he was also arrested while covering the protests. Most news organizations assume that nation states are legitimate and should exist. We try to report things outside of some central assumptions. Goes on to talk about how police officers are not differentiating between press and protesters, which is interesting to me because all press wears badges that does that for you. But they go on to say, Chief Deputy Scott Boner of the Lee County Sheriff's Office said deputies don't distinguish between protesters and journalists when it comes to trespassing. They were told by security and deputies to leave the property. They could have walked to the roadway and did reporting there. They stayed on property and were arrested. Now this is beautiful. In response, Jen Schreider, who was arrested and charged with trespassing while covering a lockdown at Dakota Access Construction, said, "It's part of the organization I work for, a nonprofit educational media organization, to report from the front lines. The equipment I had was my cell phone. In order to capture audio and video, I needed to be where the action was." Now, this goes back to the sentiment I did the other day with fucking free speech zones. And it's the same sentiment you see with Donald Trump rallies, or you did when Donald Trump rallies were going on, is that somehow police officers, politicians, corporations think that they can dictate when and where we cover them and how we cover them. The fact that there's a guy in here who said if you come from too radical of a perspective, then you don't count as a journalist anymore, apparently, even if you have a press pass. They go on to talk about how when Amy Goodman was arrested, Vlad Erickson, the McLean County State Attorney in North Dakota, who charged Democracy Now! Host Amy Goodman with trespassing, said she's a protester, basically. Everything she reported on was from the position of justifying the protest actions. Erickson told the Bismarck Tribune, arguing that her reporting hadn't noted alleged injuries to private security guards. Is everybody that's putting out a YouTube video from down there a journalist down there too? This is another thing that Jimmy Dore keeps mentioning, is the difference between objectivity and neutrality. You know, neutral is saying, well, the protesters are doing this and the police are doing this. I don't really know who's right. Objectivity is saying the police are wrong, the protesters are right, and here's why. That's what journalists are supposed to do. Here's why you're wrong. Here's why you're right. This is how you were misleaded. This is the lie. These are the lies that they're spewing to you. These are lies. These are facts. But it seems like our media doesn't do that anymore. This is why I'm doing my own show now, because I got tired of having to watch YouTube for my fucking news. And I know that my news is now on YouTube, but my point is that CNN, MSNBC, Fox News, which is a joke. It's all a joke now. All of the left-stream, mainstream media, it's just the other side of what Republicans do. It's not truth. They just spew different lies. The article goes on to talk about Oceti-Sakowin, which is the camp that they're going to try to shut down on December 5th. They describe it as a base for opposing the pipeline, which I think is very important, which is why they're going after this camp specifically. But the article goes on to talk about the Oceti-Sakowin camp in North Dakota, which serves as a base for opposing the pipeline. Volunteers distribute press IDs that give journalists permission to take photos on camp premises after they attend an orientation. When I was at the camp recently, pass distributors suggested putting away the passes during protest actions, saying that pass carriers seem to become police targets. So this is an even more important point. Early in the article, it says that police officers are not distinguishing between protesters and press anymore. But this contradicts that in a way that's saying they are. In fact, they're actually targeting people of the press specifically. It's like when Shailene Woodley was arrested during her live feed. She wasn't doing anything wrong other than trespassing like everyone else there. But they cut her live feed off because she had thousands of people watching her. She had eyes on the issue, and that's why they stopped the live feed. That's why they arrested her, because they don't want people to know about this. Sarah LaFleur-Vetter, a filmmaker who has been covering the pipeline since August, was charged on October 22nd with trespassing and engaging in a riot in one of the largest mass protests when 127 were detained. Her camera was confiscated and eventually returned without its memory cards. And she said her bail agreement stipulated that she should not have any direct or indirect contact with Dakota Access Pipeline property. I can still go out, she said. I just have to be really careful. So let's get this straight then. Sarah, a filmmaker, which is almost kind of like a journalist. If you are a good filmmaker and you want to know about something, you will talk to people. If she wants to know about Dakota Access and get both sides of the story, she's going to have to talk to people at the Dakota Access Pipeline Company, as well as people at the protest. But in her bail agreement, it states she cannot have any direct or indirect contact with Dakota Access Pipeline. So you're trying to prevent her from doing her job? I don't understand. Why would you? Because they don't want anyone to know. Why would you go out of your way like that to make sure no one can contact Dakota Access Pipeline? If you don't have anything to hide, why are you hiding? By the time we go to court, we'll have a new president, LaFleur Vetter said. It's scarier now. The risks are bigger now. Human rights observers have also been prevented from monitoring protests. 25 people were arrested on November 15th for protesting at a Dakota Access equipment site against the disappearance and murders of indigenous women. Demonstrators blocked a road used to access the equipment yard, and police in turn blocked it off, a public thoroughfare adjacent to the site, preventing journalists and human rights observers from monitoring the events. So they're also trying to make sure that human rights observers can't observe all the atrocities against human rights that are going on in Standing Rock in Cannonball, North Dakota right now. Amnesty has visited Dakota Access protests during 2 other visits. It's worrisome and troubling when you have law enforcement really overzealously engaging in mass arrests that are actually geared at shutting down a protest. And spokesman Eric Ferrero, if the whole mindset is that protesters are the enemy and they're on some kind of battlefield, those are not police that are being set up to facilitate a peaceful protest. That is a fantastic point that we should talk about for a second, is when you have this mindset of others, they're the others, they're the enemy, and you're the one who has the guns and the mine-proof tanks. When you show up to a fight with mine-proof tanks, when you show up to police a peaceful protest with mine-proof tanks, please tell me how your intentions are to be peaceful. Even if you were to use violence, how does that create peace? How does violence create peace? Can someone please explain that to me? Because no matter how many people ever become peaceful out of a violent act, there is always going to be someone who continues that cycle of violence. Abuse is a cycle. Violence is abuse. And what they're saying here is that you can't say that you're trying to protect these people when you're water cannoning them in sub-freezing weather. You can't say that you genuinely give a shit about their existence when you're fighting this hard to put the pipeline through their land. When white people in Bismarck said no one time, and that's all it took. That is all it took, was one vote to say no, you can't put the pipeline here, and they moved. But no, because it's Native Americans, because it's people of color, because it's people without money, they're trying to get rid of them like an infestation. It's fucking disturbing. And one of the Unicorn Riot reporters had predicted Donald Trump's election victory, apparently. And I guess the question was, how do you feel about Donald Trump being president, being down here having to deal with this type of stuff regularly? And he said, quote, We might go through more tear gas filters for our gas masks, but it's pretty much the same stuff we're already dealing with. Hillary supporters, Barack Obama supporters, Democrats. This is happening under your president. There are people being water cannoned and concussion grenaded under the most progressive president in our history. And I want to make the point that I understand that there are people outside of my generation. People, my friend Sherry, who is, I believe, in her 60s. She lived through the civil rights movement. She's lived through the hard times that black people have had in the last 60 years. So I understand what it means to see a black man in power. Not only in power, but in the most powerful position on the planet. And that's an incredible point that I want to make too, is that he is the most powerful person on the planet. You're telling me that JFK could send us to the moon, but Obama can't stop people from being water cannoned and concussion grenaded? I don't understand, especially if he's the most progressive soapbox fucking president ever. I understand that it's different for people, that it's still a major victory. But for my generation, this is the expectation. It's expected that people of color will have power because people of color are equal to us. There is no question about that. So when we talk about people like Barack Obama, just because he's black doesn't mean we're not going to hold his feet to the fucking fire. And people say that's what we were going to do with Hillary, but obviously that's not what we're doing with Barack Obama, because half the left goes to sleep when Barack Obama is president. Half the left doesn't even know about North Dakota. Can you explain that to me? If you call yourself a progressive, or even someone who cares about human rights, who cares about Martin Luther King, who cares about the civil rights movement, how can you sit by so idly? How can you turn the other cheek? How can you sleep at night without being angry, without saying something, without speaking out, without talking to people who disagree with you? This is 1960, people, all over again. And what are we doing? We're saying, oh, it's not that bad. Oh, it'll pass. Oh, let's give Trump a chance. Don't give that motherfucker a second of a chance. Because then, I don't want to make this prediction, but it seems like everyone is. Nazi Germany. It's a possibility. One of the first things they did in Nazi Germany was register all the Jews. What do they want to do with Muslim people in this country? Registry. I'm getting off track here. My point is that, and I can pull up multiple articles and I can pull up multiple people who can back me up on this. It is factual, people, that Barack Obama does not give a shit about whether or not journalists can do their job in America. He wanted to talk all this shit when he was running for president in 2008 about being progressive, about taking down the NSA, which is hilarious. But this president is not progressive. And the only reason Trump is going to be able to get away so easily with everything he's going to do is because Barack Obama did everything just a little less bad, not as bad. He didn't jail any bankers. He didn't break up the big banks. He didn't regulate Wall Street. Had he done that, maybe it would be a little harder for Trump to deregulate it. Maybe a little harder for Trump to wreck the entire planet. But no, because Barack Obama stood by and cared more about whether or not Republicans liked him than whether or not his base still liked him, the people that got him elected still liked him. Now we are here watching poor, unarmed, innocent people be grenaded and water cannoned. arrested for no reason. Journalists are being arrested and jailed in America under Obama. I don't know how else to say this for people to understand, but it needs to get through your head. Because if we don't stand up to Barack Obama, how are we going to stand up to Donald Trump? If we don't stand up to people in our own party who are telling us something's wrong, if we don't stand up to our own people in our own party who are doing something that's wrong, how are we ever going to stand up to someone who is so much more powerful because he's white and because he has money? Let's talk about what to do. What can we do? I went to a meeting last night in South Denver, and it was a Community for Unity meeting, an organization that came out of the protests in Denver after Donald Trump was elected. There were over 5,000 people that marched in Denver the night Trump was elected. And those people are still coming together weeks later, hopefully months later, to come together and see what can we do? What is our first steps to stop Trump? How do we create an infrastructure to make sure that when the time is now, not yesterday or tomorrow, but when the time is now, how do we activate these people? And that's what we need to be doing across the country. We need to be networking with other people in other states and other organizations like this. We need to be talking about election reform. We need to be filling empty PCP, precinct committee people, positions in local government. We need to be talking about local government. We need to infiltrate the Democratic Party. We need to create an independent party. We need to do all of these things to gear up for 2018. Our goal is to put progressives in office in 2018, in 2020, 2022, 2024, every year, not just every 4 years, not just every 2 years. Every election there is, we need to be on top of it. We need to be able to find this information, get it to the people who need it, and bring those people out to the polls and make sure they can vote. We need to get rid of fucking voter ID laws in the South and anywhere else they exist. We need to bring back the Voting Rights Act in full and more. We need a Civil Rights Act for Native Americans, apparently. We need to get our asses off the couch and do something, or half this country is going to flee. They're going to be American refugees if we don't do something. Please click subscribe. Please share this video. Please like it. If you can, start something like this of your own. Your voice matters. Your opinion matters. You learning matters. In my group last night, we were talking about the literacy rate in America. 56% of Americans don't have a literacy rate above 8th grade, I think. We've made this country better before. And I know that we can do it again. And I don't care what I have to do. I don't care if I have to do one of these videos every fucking day and beg on my knees for people to listen to me. But I hope someone hears me in saying that it's time to do something. It's time to get involved, no matter how hard and boring it is. It's time to band together and say, no, this is not the America that I want to live in anymore. Thank you for watching.